That's it, you tell him, Jackie.
Say no more.
And they stuff animals.
Bruce Forsyth's Play Your Cards Right and Harry Seacombe's Highway. Two programmes part of your entertainment this Sunday night.
Next night, we go over to the studios of ITN for the latest... Mark Hamill star in an all-action war story, The Big Red One, tonight at 9:15.
Are you glad to be back in Devon, my aunt? Gwen's got your favourite.
Rice pudding?
Not just rice pudding, our own Devon rice pudding made with full cream Devon milk.
He knows what's good for him.
Ambrosia creamed rice. The one with the taste and goodness of full cream Devon milk.
If you'd like to know what makes an Asda superstore altogether better, you'll have to wait until 9 a.m. next Tuesday, when we open in High Wycombe near Junction 4 off the M40.
The basis of democracy is, after all, the feeling that no major interest group of voters will ever be denied their chance of representation.
You don't get much closer to disaster than missing a penalty and conceding 2 goals in the space of 8 swift...
Colin, I'm not sure about this one for the cover. That one's more glamorous, but I really think we need something...
As editor, I'm glad to have such an award-winning team around me. The 4-section Observer, with Colour magazine, if you want to be really well read on a Sunday.
Abbey National have raised the rate for money on 7 days' notice. Come on in.
With Abbey National.
It's said that Macau is the hottest city in China. So I always bring a bar of Wright's coal tar soap, just in case. Wright's coal tar soap. I keep it handy if I'm getting into hot water.
The health service now faces serious cuts, yet the government says it's safe. What's the truth? Watch Weekend World live tomorrow at noon on ITV.
Now the news at 9 o'clock.
Attempted attack on President Reagan, White House aide held by gunman. CND's biggest rally against Cruz. European disarmers join in. Russia's Salyut 7 is refueled in space. And why Wales is singing the praises of rugby, Japanese style. Good evening. A gunman has taken a White House aide hostage at a golf club in Augusta, Georgia, where President Reagan was playing golf. The president is safe. The gunman crashed a truck through the gates of the Augusta National Golf Club earlier this evening. He took a hostage and is now in the Golf Pro Shop.
The gunman, driving a blue and silver van, crashed through the front gate of the exclusive golf club where President Reagan and leading members of his administration are spending the weekend. Pursued by police and Secret Service agents, the gunman took a White House aide as hostage and barricaded himself into the club's sports shop. Mr. Reagan, who was playing a round of golf with his Treasury Secretary, Mr. Donald Regan, and the Secretary of State, Mr. George Shultz, at the time, was immediately informed of the incident. President Reagan then telephoned the gunman. On the first attempt, he hung up. On the second, he asked Mr. Reagan for a personal meeting, but the request was rejected. White House officials insist that at no time was President Reagan in any danger. Andrew Mandelstam, ITN, Washington.
We hope to bring you developments on that story later in the bulletin. More than 1 million people throughout Europe have taken part in mass demonstrations against plans for cruise and Pershing missile bases. It's the climax of the hot autumn of protests in Britain, France, Germany, Italy and Scandinavia. The Russians claimed it showed that the common people rejected the militaristic policies of NATO.
In London, there were so many demonstrators that there had to be 3 separate marches from the Thames Embankment to Hyde Park. The protest, described by CND leader Joan Ruddock as the most magnificent ever staged by the movement, brought chaos to the West End. It took more than 5 hours for all the marchers to trudge through the streets. In Whitehall, they faced a noisy counter-demonstration, but they chose to ignore it.
This is a sound which has not been heard over Britain for 40 years. Thanks to a defence policy backed by nuclear deterrence.
Among the CND ranks was a small group of dissident Tories, spurred on by a lady shouting, "Keep it up, chaps." They were vastly outnumbered, though, by those on the left. The peace demonstrators kept pouring into Hyde Park all afternoon. Then, to loud applause, up stepped the new Labour leader, Neil Kinnock, to deliver his anti-nuclear message. He shouted himself hoarse, trying to overcome a group of chanting anarchists.
After the first strike, the first nuclear strike, there is only the end. If there is therefore no way of stopping nuclear war, all effort must go into ensuring there can be no start to nuclear war. That is the only way to prevent it. And the only way to is by disarmament.
Scotland Yard said they made 18 arrests for minor offences and described the demonstration as generally very peaceful. But they disputed CND's claim that 500,000 people finally squeezed into Hyde Park. They said 200,000 was more accurate. But as far as CND is concerned, from today the peace movement is now much stronger than ever before. Malcolm Brabant, ITN, Hyde Park.
Nearly 500,000 people gathered in Bonn to form a human chain across the Rhine. Former Chancellor Willy Brandt told them later he was firmly against Pershing in this country which already has more missiles than any other in Europe. In the south, 200,000 people formed a 60-mile human chain between Stuttgart and the American base at Neu-Ulm. 350 were arrested. Some of the banners in Hamburg were held by soldiers who joined the demonstrators. Others carried effigies as they marched. Berlin protesters complained against what they call Germany's kowtowing to America, which is seen here as the perpetrator of all evil. 400 different groups converged on Vienna's City Hall. Speakers called for an end to the balance of terror between the superpowers. And in Rome, 100,000 people, much less than expected, turned out for a demonstration mainly organised by the communists. It was throughout Europe an impressive turnout nonetheless, and one which will be hard to ignore.
In Northern Ireland, 6 more terrorist suspects have been charged with murder and firearms offences on the evidence of another supergrass. They're all loyalists implicated by the informer John Gibson, who faces 2 murder charges. The IRA supergrass, Robert Lean, who retracted his evidence earlier this week, may now face prosecution.
Lean was arrested on Wednesday after retracting evidence implicating 27 men in terrorist crimes. He claimed police forced him to sign statements. Now he's been named by another supergrass, and his wife says he's lost his immunity from prosecution.
The solicitor told me that he was being charged with a murder that took place in 1981, and the person that is saying he done this was the supergrass that pointed him out 6 weeks ago.
The first supergrass, Joseph Bennett, fled abroad after giving evidence which helped to send 14 men to prison for 200 years. He said, "My usefulness was measured by the number of men I put away." Ulster Secretary James Pryor has defended the supergrass system, which he once hailed as a breakthrough in the fight against terrorism. He's determined the policy will continue, even though it's in danger of breaking down. Yet another supergrass seems likely to retract his evidence next week.
An unmanned spacecraft has docked with the Russian Salyut 7 space station, bringing fuel, oxygen and food for the 2 cosmonauts who've been on board for 4 months. Salyut's believed to have sprung a leak in its fuel lines and lost up to 2/3 of its propellant. As the docking started today, the cosmonauts changed into their spacesuits and prepared for an emergency return to Earth if things went wrong. After the successful link-up, they moved through a hatch back to the main flight deck. In Britain, a Kettering group of Soviet space watchers say the cosmonauts don't appear to be in any imminent danger. It's now thought they may stay aboard to try to repair their damaged fuel lines. The Americans are sending a naval task force and 2,000 Marines to Grenada, where Prime Minister Maurice Bishop was killed in a left-wing coup on Wednesday. Washington says they'll stand by offshore in case Americans have to be taken home. But Grenada's new rulers claim the Marines are preparing for an invasion. Leaders of other Caribbean countries are meeting to discuss sanctions against Grenada. Several have already condemned the military takeover. Last Saturday, we reported the story of Hitler's head of secret intelligence, Admiral Canaris, who passed secrets to the British during the war. His go-between was the wife of a Polish diplomat, Mrs. Szymanska, who we incorrectly described as his mistress. Mrs. Szymanska is now in the United States, and we regret any pain we may have caused her and her family. Now with the sports news, including a major reshuffle at the top of Division 1 and a report on why the Japanese went home singing from Cardiff. Here's our sports correspondent, Jeremy Thompson.
A big reshuffle at the top of Division 1 sees Liverpool move into second place. Substitute Steve Nicholls scored his first goal for the Merseyside club, and that was enough to end Queen's Park Rangers' 10-month unbeaten home record. But Manchester United stayed top after a 1-0 win at Sunderland. The decisive goal came after 19 minutes when Stapleton, chasing a Robson free kick, was pushed by Elliott. Referee Hutchinson awarded a penalty. Ray Wilkins put away the spot kick to give United 3 points. West Ham dropped another place after being held to a goalless draw by Norwich at Upton Park, and Southampton, who'd conceded only 2 league goals before today, went down 3-1 at Luton. Tony Francis was there.
Trouble was heading Luton's way inside 4 minutes. Frank Bunn took a sickening blow in the face and departed for hospital with a fractured cheekbone. You could have heard the crack all around the ground. But out of adversity, a quite stunning performance which confirms Luton's maturity. Stevens engineered the first 2 goals. Steen got the vital touch, and Aylot's half volley hit the net like a shell. 20 minutes later, the impregnability of Southampton's defence was exposed as a myth. Once more, it was Aylott deputising for the suspended Paul Walsh, who hammered it in. Shilton's intimidating presence probably saved Southampton going 3 down when Moss completely lost his head from the penalty spot. But the 3rd goal had to come. Once more, Aylott had a hand. Steen's dummy, Steen again. Thank you very much. Southampton were looking pretty ragged by now, but collected a surprise consolation when David Armstrong began and finished their only incisive move. But Luton were home, and decisively, and most of the credit goes to Trevor Aylott. 2 goals, a sore knee, and a handshake from the best goalkeeper in the business. Tony Francis, ITN Sport, Kenilworth Road.
Joe Jury is through to the final of the £100,000 Daihatsu Challenge at Brighton. Miss Jury, the British #1, made a great recovery to beat American Pam Shriver in straight sets 7-5, 6-4. Her opponent tomorrow will be Chris Lloyd, who won her semi-final when Andrea Temeshvari retired with an injured back. Rugby Union Wales were given the fright of their lives against Japan at the National Stadium today. They only just managed to scrape home by 29 points to 24. Japan's quick running and inventive style caused big problems for the new-look Welsh team.
Wales had picked a whole set of new exciting three-quarters, and one of them, Mark Titley, opened up the Japanese defence to send Adrian Hadley in at the corner. Hadley was one of 8 uncapped players in the experimental Welsh side. But with fly half Malcolm Dacey enjoying his finest game in a red jersey, the team's inexperience didn't seem to be showing. And Dacey himself finally popped up at the end of this marvellous move to score one of 5 Welsh tries. Wales led 29-10 at one stage, but Japan, who'd lost just once in their 4 tour matches, came storming back. They thrilled the Arms Park crowd with some tremendous running rugby, and fullback Tanefuji was one of 4 players to cross the Welsh line. In the end, they'd narrowed the gap to just 5 points, with Wales pushed all the way to win by 29 points to 24. Rob King, ITN Sport, Cardiff.
A home win in the last big Classics trial of the season, with Alpha Batum, trained by Guy Harwood, ridden by Greville Starkey, beating off the challenge of the French favourite Mendes to take the William Hill Futurity Stakes. The commentator at Doncaster, Graham Good.
A furlong and a half to go in the William Hill Futurity, and it's Iliam in the lead from Lake Valentina, Alpha Batum. Mendes really fairly eating up the ground on the outside. Inside the final furlong, it's Alpha Batum and Mendes and Iliam from Falstaff. Iliam next to the rails, Mendes on the stand side, but Alpha Batum just has it. Alpha Batum sticking his neck out, is going to win it at the line. It's going to be Alpha Batum the winner.
And the result, Alpha Batum 9-2, at the 11-8 favourite Mendes second, and third Iliam at 12-1.
Now, the latest on the news of the White House aid being held in Augusta, Georgia. Andrew, can you tell us what the latest is?
Well, the latest is that we now know that the White House aide, who's been identified as Larry Wiles, has in fact been released by the gunman. But the gunman is still barricaded in the pro shop, just a short distance from where President Reagan is staying.
Thank you, Andrew, very much indeed. That's all we have time for. And that's all from us. Don't forget, clocks go back this evening. Good night.
There's live league football on ITV at 2:30 this Sunday. It's Wolves against Aston Villa from Molineux. The first big match live set a terrific standard. Now it's the turn of Wolves and the Villa. 2:30 ITV Sunday.
Now the weather forecast. The night will be dry with long clear spells. It will be a cold night with frost in rural districts. Lowest temperature 1 degree centigrade, 34 Fahrenheit. But in central London, not much below 5 centigrade, 41 Fahrenheit. In colder regions, there could be some patches of fog. On Sunday, after the early clearance of any frost and fog, it will be another dry day with some sunshine. Maximum temperature tomorrow, 14 degrees centigrade, 57 degrees Fahrenheit. Next tonight, Lee Marvin stars in The Big Red One, the adult movie.